So what we're going to cover in this information session today is who we are as a program, an overview of our program, an overview of our admissions process, and then any questions you all might have either about the program, about the admissions process, about graduate school in general, whatever we can answer for you. So as I mentioned, my name is Ann Muska. I am the program manager for the Master of Arts in Educational Transformation at Georgetown. That means I handle all things logistical, operational, admissions, student support, any of that kind of work. With me on the call today are Doug Reed, our program director, and Sabrina Wesley Nero, our program assistant director. They will be helping me with this presentation. They are also on the call. We also have several other faculty members in our program that you can see on both this slide and this slide. So first, we want to tell you a little bit about who we are as a program. We were launched in 2017, actually, as part of Georgetown's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And we are actually the first program at Georgetown to offer a teaching licensure, which is very exciting. We're designed for graduate students who are interested in ensuring that all children in U.S. K-12 schools have the opportunities and resources needed not only to thrive, but also not only to survive, but also thrive. Excuse me. We're committed to ensuring that our students, our graduate students, have the knowledge, skills, foresight, competence, and understanding to transform the U.S. education system, whether that's through the classroom as a classroom teacher or through policy and advocacy work outside of the classroom. And our program employs a residency-based model that integrates experiential learning with our rigorous coursework, and we'll actually talk about that residency-based model a little bit later. I'm now going to turn it over to Professor Reed, our program director, to tell us a little bit about our program commitments.
Good afternoon or evening, everyone. I'm very glad you're here. We have a number of commitments within our program that inform the work that we do and how we organize our courses and the program more generally. The first is we really take an integrative, interdisciplinary approach to education that really focuses and stresses systemic thinking. So we look at all of the pieces in a holistic view, interdisciplinary view, and how they connect across various dimensions of the educational system. We also take an asset-based and culturally and linguistic relevant and sustaining approach to children's learning. And this is part of and a reflection of Georgetown's commitment to focusing on educating the whole child. So we really look at not just test scores and outcomes, but who this child is as a person, their background, their language, their who they are and their identities. We also explicitly take an anti-racist stance to education, and we view that as central to any program that's pursuing social justice. We also have an emphasis on graduate learning that's really anchored in experiential learning and experiential learning and research, as well as utilizing what Georgetown labels knowledge in action through residency programs. So through the residency programs, you learn while doing, in addition to the coursework that you take. Hand it back over to Ann.
So now we're going to talk about structure of the program, which is the part I'm sure you're all most excited about. So our program has two concentrations available, the advocacy policy concentration and the learning and teaching concentration. You might also see the learning and teaching concentration referred to as the Georgetown University Teacher Residency Program. Within our learning and teaching program, we have one licensure option available, which is the ESL licensure, so working with English language learners, multilingual learners. Our program is designed to be a one-year intensive program. So we start in July and go through June to kind of match the K-12 school year. We do this year have a part-time enrollment option available. If you are interested in the part-time enrollment option, please get in touch with me so we can talk through what that'll look like for you. But typically our program is a full-time one-year program. It is a 30 credit hour program, so that's 10 courses spread out from over that 12-month period I mentioned, July to June. The way the program is structured is that you work at your residency experience during the day, and in the evening, you're in full-time graduate coursework. And that graduate coursework really complements the work that you're doing in your residency experience during the day. Our total tuition is about $61,000, but we do have significant scholarships available, particularly for our learning and teaching students. Some things that are unique to our program, we keep mentioning our residency experience, which is something we're very excited about, but our students are not just studying when they're in our program, they're also learning by doing in their residency placement that they're in throughout the academic year. We have a professional development speaker series that meets a few times a semester, where we have a panel of experts come in to talk about an issue in education, or community members come in, or education scholars come in to talk about something within education. And that allows our students to really connect with, engage with, build their network with public educators, researchers, educational advocates, other teachers. And as a cohort-based program, so we're a smaller, intentionally cohort-based program, our students really develop close relationships with both their cohort mates, but also our professors because of our small cohort sizes. So our professors are really with you from day one in the program, and you really work with them throughout the year so that they know exactly what's going on with you, any issues you might be having, any successes you're having, right? So I'm now going to tell you a little bit about the curriculum. So as I mentioned, we have a 12-month program, July to June. In our first summer, you take 2 classes. Fall and spring, you take 3 classes. And so our second summer, you take 2 classes. I'm first going to turn it over to Professor Reed to talk a little bit about the advocacy and policy coursework and what that curriculum looks like. And then Professor Wesley Nero to talk about the learning and teaching coursework.
Sure, thank you. So in the first summer, which begins the first full week after the 4th of July, all the students take a course together in both concentrations, take the same course, which is culturally relevant education and social justice. I'll let Professor Wesley Nero talk about that since she plays an active role in teaching that course. For the advocacy and policy students, there's a critical empirics course, which is really kind of a first exposure to data and taking a critical stance to how educational statistics can both empower both teachers and policymakers, but also obscure aspects of inequalities within education. So we want students to take a real critical investigatory stance towards numbers and quantitative analysis within education. And then in the fall, you do a policy residency course, which is a sort of an adjunct course to your policy experience. So it sort of becomes a space for you to sort of reflect on what's going on in your residency with a faculty member and your other members of your cohort. That continues throughout the year in fall and spring. You have a policy analysis course in the fall and a data analysis, which really continues on what happens in critical empirics, but really pushes it more in probably more traditional quantitative treatments of educational policy. In the spring, there's an organizational change course and an intergovernmental relations and accountability course, which really focuses on the state, federal, local dimensions of education and how accountability policies work within that. In summer 2, there's another course that you take in conjunction with the learning and teaching students, which is advocating for learners and learning. That course is really designed to think about how you put into motion these analytical tools that you've been learning over the course of the year, and really define a project for advocating on behalf of both learners and learning. And then you also take a learning design and assessment policy course, which is aimed at sort of thinking about how do we understand what are the best methods for understanding what children have learned, and what are the dynamics of assessment in a that's empowering for students rather than punitive. So that's the highlights of the advocacy and policy concentration. I'll pass it over to Dr. Wesley Nero.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'll give you a brief overview of the curriculum for the learning and teaching concentration. First, I'd like to acknowledge that since we have two concentration, it really does demonstrate the multiple ways we view education can be impacted toward equity. So those students in advocacy and policy who work from outside of the schools and those students in learning and teaching who work from inside the schools do have fundamental experiences they take together. So as Professor Reed mentioned, that first experience is one of the summer courses, Culturally Relevant Education and Social Justice. And that's a course that we all take together, and it serves as a baseline where we develop shared language and understandings around frameworks of identity, around social justice and education, and look at research and theories that allow us to envision education as a tool for social justice within schools. So that is something that both cohorts take, or both concentrations take, in the summer. Specifically for learning and teaching, your second course in that first summer really seeks to develop your fundamental understanding of educational linguistics. It's entitled Critical Educational Linguistics in K-12 Settings. So in DC, the teaching license that you will pursue in this program is a K-12 ELL license. So we spend that first summer making sure everyone has the knowledge and skills about educational linguistics to support education success for multilingual learners in schools. In the fall and spring, there's a course series, Residency 1 and Residency 2, that really wraps around your experience in schools. In those courses, you develop fundamental instructional design knowledge. You understand how to design lessons, units, and assessments. You look at backwards design models. You look at differentiation in those courses as well. In the fall, we have a course entitled Creative Productive Classroom Communities. This really is what maybe you may see in other programs that are about classroom management. For us, it's really about how do you facilitate a classroom community where every learner feels invited and empowered to learn. It's looking at relationships that you foster as an educator with your students and among your students and with your students' families. To round out your educational linguistics sequence in the fall, you also take a second language acquisition, instruction, and assessment course. This is where you develop the knowledge and skills to think about how multilingual learners acquire language in an educational setting, how to design instruction that supports their language development, and how to understand both standardized assessments and teacher and school created assessments to inform that instruction. In the spring semester, in addition to the teacher residency course that I mentioned before that continues from fall to spring, there are two additional courses that students in learning and teaching concentration take. One is Emergent Bilinguals in schools. You look at the culture and identity of multilingualism in schools, looking at policies that support or maybe constrain multilingual learners' ability to thrive in schools, and how we can understand their cultural identity, their cultural strengths in order to support their success in schools. And the third course you take in spring is language and literacy development, particularly in the content area. So you look at the science of reading, look at developing language vocabulary, language structures, and linguistical knowledge in the content areas, along with literacy development. And then in the summer, as Professor Reed mentioned, both concentrations take advocating for learners and learning together. In addition, learning and teaching students also take a child and adolescent development course, where we look at the development of children from about pre-K or kindergarten through adolescent, through secondary school, and how the developmental practices and theories we can understand to better support them in schools.
Thank you. I'm going to briefly go over our part-time curriculum, if you're interested in that. So the coursework is the same, but for our part-time curriculum, you will be attending our program over 2 years. In the first year, you'll be taking 12 credits or 4 courses. And then in the second year, you'll be taking 18 credits or 6 courses, and that is when you will do your residency experience in your second year. Again, if you are interested in the part-time option, please let me know so we can talk through it. We're now going to talk about the residency experience. So as I mentioned, our students are in their full-time coursework in the evening, but they are working at their residency experience during the day. I'm going to reverse it this time and have Professor Wesley Nero talk about the learning and teaching residency experience. And I know we've had some questions about that in the chat, and then have Professor Reed talk about the advocacy and policy residency experience.
Thanks, Anne. So in learning and teaching, the program really is designed for either beginning or aspiring educators. So these may be educators who have 3 or fewer years of experience, or people who are aspiring to be educators. So they have yet to become full-time classroom teachers. So part of what we do is that they have a full-time residency in schools, either DCPS or DC charter schools. I'm working with multilingual learners. So if you are interested in getting your master's degree and becoming certified to teach multilingual learners in public schools in DC in grades K through 12, that is the area or the concentration that would most align with your interests. Your residency placement, as I mentioned, is in a public school in DC. It can be a public charter school or a school in DCPS. We have an executed agreement with DCPS, and we have agreements with public charter schools as well. We support you in seeking an aligned position where you are working with multilingual learners. And then we have a gradual release of responsibility where you grow in responsibility across the academic year as a teacher resident. The schools also jointly with us identify a mentor teacher with you. So then you have a mentor that is set in your schools, and you have the faculty who are helping you with coursework, and then your experience in schools working with multilingual learners throughout the entire academic year, so that what you're learning in class about theory and pedagogy and research, designing instruction, you're able to put into practice in schools with the support of a mentor and your faculty. That is the basic structure of a residency for learning and teaching. If you have already a full-time position, or you want to talk about any of the kind of individualized context around your particular position in a school or the position you would like to have, I'm happy to set up individual appointments and talk through those as well.
Great, thank you, Sabrina. So the residency experience for advocacy and policy is really focused on getting our students out into the policy community and the advocacy community that's doing the work that around educational transformation, about changing the nature of education within the K through 12 system in the United States. As you know, in DC, there's a lot of educational interest groups, lobbying organizations, governmental agencies that come together here, and we have relationships with a number of partners. And we start the process of the residency placement first with a kind of a survey of you to find out what you want to work on and what you want to do here and how you want to grow your own skill set. And then we sort of think about the partners that we have, or think about maybe adding new partners that would enable you to have the kind of experience you want. And then it's sort of an iterative process where we look over your resume, we send out the resume to our partners. If they're interested in pursuing it, they will interview you or have whatever selection mechanism they have. So it's important to realize that these organizations and these governmental agencies and think tanks, they're going through their selection process. We don't necessarily pick who goes where. So it's up to them. Generally, what we try to insist on in these partnerships as we form them is we ask that they be paid residencies. Sometimes that's through a stipend, sometimes that's through a wage on an hourly basis. But when we come to an agreement, they decide that they want to have you on board and you want to work with them. We work out a 3-way agreement that all 3 parties sign, so everybody's clear on what your work expectations are, the tasks that you'll be doing, who you'll be reporting to, the calendar you'll be working on, et cetera. And then your residency generally starts in late August, early September, and then runs through the end of April at the end of the spring semester. We like to have these long residency experiences because it helps you dig into a project and get to know an organization and really have a deeper and better sense of the kind of work that they do. And it also helps you have a sort of a gradual increase of responsibility within an organization. We find that that's really helpful for students. If you have a current job within an education field, we can talk about having your job be part of the residency experience. What we have to do is sort of carve out an additional set of expectations that goes beyond what you currently do, because we need you to grow and test new skills and implement new strategies. but we can talk about that. And also, if there are particular organizations that you want to work with, we're happy to approach organizations and see if they're interested in partnering with us. So happy to take any further questions about that as we get into the Q&A.
You both. So just some sample career paths of our alumni. Our alumni go on to do a lot of different things. So I've listed some job titles here that might be interesting to you, but I would also like to emphasize that our graduates sometimes go on to PhD programs. We had one student who went on to law school because she wanted to do education-related law. We have students who stay in DC, work for local government or local organizations. We have students who go back to maybe their home state because they want to work in local education governance there. We have students who stay in the classroom, especially for our learning and teaching students, since you're pursuing your teaching license. But we also have students in our advocacy and policy concentration who end up going back to the classroom because now that they have a different scope of the advocacy work they can do as a teacher. Right? So our teachers do a lot of different things. Our students do a lot of different things. And at a lot of different levels, right? Working at the local level, working at the state level, working at the federal level. Okay, so now we're going to go over the admissions process briefly. So this is the admissions process for graduate school for the Master of Arts at Georgetown. So to apply to our program, you will need the completed application form, which is found at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences website. It is also linked on our website. If you apply before January 15th, you do not have to pay an application fee. If you apply after January 15th, you will have to pay an application fee, although we are able, through grant funding, to waive the application fee totally for learning and teaching applicants. We ask you for a 500-word statement of purpose. So for the statement of purpose, we're really asking, why do you want to do graduate school? Why do you want to do this specific program? What about this specific program is really going to help you reach your professional goals in education? For the learning and teaching students, we also ask you to talk about your teaching philosophy and how that aligns with our program. We have a writing exercise response. So rather than have you submit a writing sample from maybe a paper you wrote in your undergraduate program, we actually present you with I think it's about 3-page report from the Aspen Institute on education in the US and ask you to prepare a 500-word response. There is a prompt in the application, so it's not just a general 500-word response. We ask you specific questions in the prompt. We ask for a copy of your current resume or CV. We require 3 letters of recommendation. Typically, what we ask is that 2 of your letters of recommendation be from former professors of yours. So people who can speak to what you're like as a learner, because this is a graduate program. And then your 3rd letter would be a professional reference. We appreciate that some of our applicants have been out of undergrad for a long time and maybe don't know any of their professors anymore, or maybe did undergrad in a field that really doesn't feel relevant to pursuing a graduate degree in education. And so those professors maybe can't speak very well to what you would be like learning in a graduate education context. For those students, we ask that you try to get 1 academic reference, because we do really want to see what you're like as a student, but then you can do 2 professional references. If you have further questions about what recommendations you can ask for, please feel free to get in touch with me. We require unofficial copies of all of your transcripts, so from your undergraduate degree and then any graduate degrees you might already have. If your undergraduate degree was from an institution where the language of instruction was not English, we're going to ask you to demonstrate English language proficiency with either the TOEFL or the IELTS exam. And then for learning and teaching students, this is a requirement to get your teaching license in DC. You will need to provide 1 of 3 things. 1, proof that your undergraduate GPA, your undergraduate, if you already have a graduate degree, that doesn't count. Your undergraduate degree was, your GPA was over a 3.0 on the 4.0 scale. If your undergraduate GPA was under 3.0, then you will either need to take the Praxis Core exam or the GRE exam and submit those scores along with your application. So as we mentioned, our program starts in the summer. So for our summer 2025 cohort, we have 3 application deadlines. Our priority scholarship consideration deadline is December 15th. That is when we are able to give out the largest scholarship packages for our students. So we recommend that you apply on the early end. If you apply before January 15th, your application fee is waived. If you are an international student, we also strongly recommend that you apply by the January 15th deadline to allow time to process your visa. Because we start a little bit earlier than other graduate programs do, we want to make sure there's enough time for that processing. Our final application deadline is April 1st. And as a reminder, that's April 1st to start in early July. So if you can get your application in earlier, that's great. You'll have a little bit less of a quick turnaround time then to figure out your plans. And as I mentioned, submitting by that priority deadline, that December deadline, increases your chances of receiving a larger merit aid package from our team. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about different ways to fund the program. So all of our applicants are considered for program funded merit aid. If you apply earlier, that's when we have the larger packages, right? But everyone is considered for merit aid. Learning and teaching applicants are also considered for additional funding through a grant project that we have called Project Elect, which is a grant funded by the Department of Education to help us develop more multilingual teachers for multilingual students. Anyone who applies to the learning and teaching concentration is considered for that scholarship. There are some stipulations to that scholarship. So you will want to look at the stipulations if you receive the scholarship to make sure that you can meet the requirements, but all L&T applicants are considered for it. I would also like to note that your residency experience, whether it's your learning and teaching position as an educational aide or a teacher, or almost all of our advocacy and policy placements, are paid. So that will also help you fund the program. We do have 1 or 2 advocacy and policy residency experiences that are not paid, but we always confirm with our students if that's something that they're comfortable with before taking on the position. So we now have time for questions from you. You can either put questions in the chat or come off mute. If you are able to come off mute, I would like you to introduce yourself by name and then also tell us what concentration you are applying to, whether advocacy and policy or learning and teaching.
Hi, my name is Angela Gord Curry. I am a certified teacher within DCPS. I was wondering, I'm interested, I'm not sure yet in which program actually, but both of them sound exciting. My question is, because I already hold a license, am I still required to do what was it? You had to have a 3.0 or the Praxis or whatever. My license is still valid in 2002 until 2006.
Hi, Angela. First, thanks for being here and for working in our schools with our students all across the city here. We can look at your license. You have a DC license currently, and we can look at your license
Yep.
and to verify whether or not you still need to take the Praxis. But if you have a license, it generally implies that you've already passed Praxis Core. So we just want to make sure that is traceable through your license with OSSI. But that's something we can look into.
Thank you.
I'll jump in with a question. Sorry. So my name is Anthony Guyton. I'm interested in the advocacy and policy program. My question, I think I had 2 parts of a question. So first question is kind of like thinking about the data analytics piece of this, how much mathematical background would be useful to kind of come into the program with. And then the second part of the question is thinking about kind of the K to 12 lens. One of the things I'm interested in is kind of like college access piece. Would that kind of align with the work that's being done, kind of the research that would be kind of pursued, kind of where does that alignment make sense for you all? I guess it's kind of my two questions. So sorry for squeezing those together.
Sure. Thank you, Anthony. So on the stats piece, so we have students that have a wide range of backgrounds, not only in the work they've done before, but also how recent and how deep their math experiences were. So we fully understand that people are coming at this from a bunch of different places. Our goal is to sort of help everyone, no matter where they start, to develop the level of sort of reading and consuming ability to be a critical analyst of data that are presented within the educational policy world. So we're not a high tech, number crunching kind of place. We want to develop the skills of our students to be able to consume those materials. But we try to do this kind of in a iterative fashion over 2 and 3 semesters. And so, having a math background can be helpful, but it's not essential for what we're wanting our students to be able to do. So I wouldn't, if the last math class you had was, algebra in high school, you'd be able to do what we're, how we're approaching it. We've got talented instructors, and like I said, we sort of go at it from multiple angles to ensure that students have the skills. In terms of the higher education focus question, so if you're really looking for a program that focuses on sort of universities and a job within higher education, like higher education, administration, probably not the right place. But if you're really thinking about that nexus between sort of secondary schooling and inequities in sort of college going rates and college preparation, then yeah, we definitely, that fits within the approach that we take in terms of how do we rethink and deploy resources in order to ensure that students who want to go to college have the skills and resources to be successful in college. So that sort of that jumping off point into higher education, we definitely focus on. But if you're really looking at, okay, I want to do, higher education administration, that's not really where we're focused. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was great. Thank you. Thank
you.
If you're like me, you'll think of a question like 2 hours from now that you forgot to ask. So while I'm allowing people to collect their thoughts, I'm actually going to switch to my contact slide. So in case you think of a question later that you meant to ask, please feel free to either email me directly or email the program email at transform@georgetown.edu. Or if you would like to set up an appointment with me to chat, you can use my Calendly link.
Also, and there was a question that came up in the chat about having this recording available. So
This
just want to,
recording will be sent to everyone who RSVP'd for this event.
perfect, great.
I'll also highlight the question in the chat about the scholarships and just reemphasize that there's no separate application you have to do to be considered for merit aid. Like your full application, everyone is considered for any available aid that aligns with your application and your concentration.
Can you put your Calendly link in the chat? So
Yeah, absolutely. I will also put Professor Reed and Professor Wesley Nero's emails in the chat in case you want to set up an appointment with them.
as you can see, we're very comfortable with the pedagogical silence of letting students come to their own thoughts about things. So we don't want to rush anyone.
We also appreciate that you might have questions that are very particular to your situation that you don't necessarily want to ask in a group forum. So someone asked in the chat about how much is tuition. Our total tuition is about $61,000, but we do have significant scholarships available, and every applicant to the program is considered for scholarships. Angelica, we are actually recording this, so you will receive a link to the recording in your email once we're done.
And I also want to say about the scholarship and aid that's available. So when you get your letter of admission, you'll also receive shortly after that a package that indicates what your aid has been or is going to be. And so the incentives are for you to apply as early as possible to ensure that you have a full understanding of what's available and also to maximize your own aid package. We do prioritize the December 15th applications for consideration of merit aid. So the sooner you get the ball rolling, the better outcome for you.
I'll also highlight that early application facilitates the residency placement process, particularly for learning and teaching. The sooner that you apply, we can evaluate your application, get out your admissions offer along with any merit aid or scholarship information, and then you accept us, then we can start as soon as you do that, started to reach out to our school partners as soon as they know what positions they have available for next year, and you can start that interview process sooner rather than later. So basically the early bird, gets the worm if you're not a vegetarian, but the early bird definitely can chirp its song loudest. So
The early bird has a slightly less stressful timeline in terms of setting up the residency.
great, that's great, Anne.
All right, if there are no more questions, thank you all for coming out virtually tonight. Since you all RSVP'd for this, you will receive a link to the recording in your email. If you have any follow-up questions, whether it's about the residency experience, about your application, about coursework, about part-time versus full-time, please feel free to get in touch with us. We're happy to answer any questions. All right, have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time zone you're in.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it.